In 1870, a curious businessman from Germany was determined to uncover a hidden truth that had survived for thousands of years through an ancient Greek epic poem. He believed that Homer's Iliad, which became popularized thanks to the movie Troy, was based on true events, and that the vicious war between the Achaeans and the Trojans was a true historical event, a belief that the scholars and historians of his time found odd and delusional. But Heinrich Schliemann did not worry about people's judgment and opinions. Driven by curiosity, he traveled to modern-day Turkey, in a town now called Hisarlik. About 2.5 decades before that, Charles Maclaren had determined that this must have been the location the ancient sources were referring to, a location close to Hellespont, the narrow straits that lead to the Sea of Marmara, with a vast plain and a major river nearby. Excavations were made in the past by Frank Calvert, and many other archaeologists contributed in what was about to be uncovered. An ancient city hidden beneath the ground, the result of a research that took several years and continued into the 21st century. Today, the answer is loud and clear. The city of Troy existed. People do visit its archaeological site at Hisarlik in modern-day Turkey, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1998. And now, another question arises. Were the events described by Homer all true? And what about the origins of the Trojans? Was the Trojan War a civil war? Welcome to the 9th episode of Helinika's podcast. I'm your hostess Marielena, and today we explore the ruins of the ancient polis of Ilion, the city of sun, which was later renamed Tria, and you may know it as Troy. Now, before we try to answer the question, let's go back to Homer and his epic poem, the Iliad. Thousands of years ago, before the appearance of films and literature as we know it, people would gather around the fire and listen to stories of heroes and heroines who traversed the seas, fought monsters, went into the underworld, and saved humanity. In the 8th century BC, these storytellers were called rhapsodes. They were a kind of wandering reciters of epics, igniting a spark of hope and inspiration in the minds of people. These storytellers were gifted with a remarkable memory, being able to memorize and recite by heart tens of thousands of lines. Whether these poems survived through oral tradition or because they were written down remains a mystery. But most scholars believe that the epics were spread by the word of mouth. Perhaps the most influential of the rhapsodes, rhapsody in Greek, was no other than Homer, his name being Omiros. Homer's name has survived to this day thanks to two epics, the Odyssey and the Iliad. The latter is considered the oldest extant work of literature still widely read by modern audiences. And I do mention the word literature because the epic poem was eventually written down by the ancient Athenians. Initially, the Iliad was composed in Homeric Greek, a literary mixture of Ionic Greek and other dialects, around the late 8th century BC. Once it was written down, approximately 2 centuries later, it was divided into 24 books. The so-called dactylic hexameter form was followed, a rhythmic scheme that was used extensively in ancient Greek and Roman poetry. Just like with other epic poems, the Iliad starts with an invocation to the muse, a divine feminine form of inspiration for artists, and the story unravels from what would almost be the end. So, in medias res, a popular chronological plotline that is used by storytellers to this day. Homer informs us that the Achaeans, one of the 4 tribes of the Greeks, along with their allies, seized the kingdom of Troy. Why? You may be asking. Well, contrary to Homer, let's take things from the very beginning. Remember Pelion, the land of the mythical centaurs, which I mentioned in the previous episode. I'm talking about the last mountain range of central Greece that enters the Aegean Sea, creating the Gulf of Pagasetikos, where the writer Helga was viciously attacked by Hisarlik. I recommend watching the 8th episode to learn more about this case. Well, we have to travel back to this location once again, this time to attend a wedding, a divine union between a king named Peleus and a nymph called Thetis. It was believed to be such a remarkable event, uniting the earthly power of men with the otherworldly force of nature, that even the gods and goddesses of Mount Olympus were invited. All deities and semi-gods were going to attend as well. All but one. Ares, the goddess of discord, was unwanted. Her presence could create unnecessary drama and arguments during the event, and perhaps she could cause the newlyweds to act hostile against each other. Her name was taken off the list. Once Ares heard that everyone else was attending, she was filled with such fury and bitterness that she made sure the presence of discord would be felt, with or without her. She conjured a golden apple with the inscription, "For the fairest." The goddess approached the meadow where the wedding celebrations were taking place, and through the bushes she tossed the apple towards a mixed group of mortals and deities. 3 goddesses, Aphrodite, Athena, and Hera, equally believed that the apple was supposed to be possessed by them. An argument started, and a young mortal, Paris, prince of the kingdom of Troy, was asked to choose. Who is the fairest of them all? Who should have received the golden apple? As he was left to contemplate his decision, the goddesses approached him one by one to bribe him. They offered him riches, power, success, but the prince had everything he needed as a mortal. The only thing he was missing was his other half. Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty and love, felt the prince's true desire and promised him to offer him the gift of falling in love, and with the most beautiful woman in the world. She was no other than Helen, the daughter of Zeus and Queen Leda, who was born into this world by zipping out of an egg bearing the gracefulness of a swan. Rumor had it that Zeus was transformed into a swan to mate with Leda in the first place. Paris, intrigued by the offer, chose to give the apple to Aphrodite, instigating a series of events that caused many deaths. The goddess orchestrated the abduction of beautiful Helen. She was the face that launched 1,000 ships from mainland Greece to Asia Minor. The Achaeans sieged the kingdom of Troy for an entire decade, only to enter its gates in the most unexpected way. Not by sacrificing themselves on the battlefield, but by using strategy and advanced engineering. Odysseus, the king of the island of Ithaca, was blessed with a strategic idea by Athena, goddess of wisdom, who, as we can imagine, would like to see Aphrodite's plan failing after the golden apple fiasco. he convinced the Achaeans to announce a ceasefire, letting the Trojans feel at ease. At the gates of the kingdom's walls, they placed the gigantic wooden horse, a gift to their former enemies. But there is a reason why people say, "Be aware of the Greeks bearing gifts." In the horse's wooden belly, the Achaeans hid quietly, waiting for the night to come and attack the kingdom from within. Going back to the main question, whether the Iliad is a fictional story or a historical event, one problem arises. The story is filled with symbolism, divine intervention, and metaphysical events. In modern times, scholars argued that the entire story of the Iliad was made up. There was no evidence that there was a city named Troy or Ilion after all. When the archaeological site was uncovered, it was difficult to dismiss all the events as fictional. Most scholars now agree that a war between the Achaean Greeks and the Trojans did occur at some point in history, with some embellishments, of course. Now, what was true and what was imaginary? Well, I will leave that up to you. Now, another topic that arises from the discovery of the city is what were the true origins of the Trojans? Were they Ionian Greeks who established colonies in Asia Minor, or another tribe and culture? If the Trojans belonged to a Greek tribe, then we would be talking about a civil war this whole time, something that was not indicated in the Iliad as we know it today. Today, most scholars believe that the kingdom was founded by a group of people who were related to the Hittites, an Anatolian Indo-European group, but who were also influenced culturally and to a certain extent biologically by the Greeks. Their true identity remains a mystery to this day, and who knows, perhaps the full story and real events will all be revealed in the future. If Maclaren, Calvert, and Schliemann were able to discover the ruins of this ancient civilization, bringing a myth into reality, what makes us believe that we cannot uncover the entire truth? Now, I'm really curious to read your opinions in the comment section. Do you believe the Iliad is based on real events? If yes, was the Trojan a civil war or a war between two distinct civilizations? See you soon in the next podcast episode.